audio.
Well, that's what I was looking for, and it's not there. It just has the mute button, and so I'm looking at my settings to see if I have something turned off.
I'll bet you're not being admitted as a panelist. Let's see. Ken Gooderham, are you present yet?
Yes, I've been trying to get him in as a panelist, and he has to accept it, and that hasn't.
Oh,
So try it again.
Join as panelist.
Okay, this time it took.
There we go.
Yeah, there you are. Hi, Matt.
How is everybody doing today?
Good. How are you? We
Doing
certainly
fine.
appreciate you taking time to be here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, is it getting to be 9? I guess it's about 9 o'clock, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's start off with the roll call. Jay Brown is here. David Mintz.
I am here. Thank you.
Tony Lappy, I've seen. Linda Laird. Hopefully Linda will come on in a few minutes. Never known her to miss a panel.
No, I'm here. I'm here. Video was
Okay.
off.
Hi,
I mean,
Linda.
whatever.
Morning, Linda.
Good morning.
All right, Bruce McDonald, I've seen. John Jensen, I've seen.
Yep.
Let's see, is Ken Gill, we've seen. Ann Brady.
Yep.
Hi, Ann.
Morning.
Marguerite, are you here? Hopefully she'll.
Right, Marguerite.
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. I was muted.
Okay, thanks, Marguerite.
Sorry.
Bob Walter.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Bob.
Morning, Bob.
And Sandy Stillwell, which I saw Sandy earlier. So everybody is present, which is great. Our first order of business is always to approve the minutes from the prior meeting. We have minutes from our regular meeting that we held a month ago. Does anybody have any comment on the meetings?
No.
Minutes, rather?
No.
Okay, all in favor of approval, raise hand, say aye.
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 Okay, Ken, do we have minutes from that special meeting that we held? I haven't seen them.
I have not been doing many minutes from the special meeting. I have recordings.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Thank you. Okay, first up on the agenda, we're going to have an update from our property appraiser, Matt Caldwell. Matt, we really appreciate you being here this morning and give us an overview of what's going on with the taxes and deletions and so forth. Our fire chief, Jeff Powell, is very interested in having you do this, so welcome.
All right, excellent. And how long do y'all want me to?
Well, you can have what you need. I've got slotted in a half hour.
Okay.
But
Right.
if that's not enough,
I could turn it into a 4-hour continuing ed if y'all want. You just let me know.
Well, we love to hear about taxes, but I don't know about 4 hours worth.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, so let me do a couple of quick basic points so we're all operating from the same framework. You all know and recognize what we developed for the tax roll is based on January 1st. That's the value date that all of our numbers are developed, and also the situation of the property, who owns it, how it's being used, the condition is all based upon the January 1st status. That's the way it's judged for the entire tax year. There's only two departures from that paradigm, and they're both special tax breaks. One is for disabled veterans. They can begin to receive their particular tax break the moment they buy a property. And then the other one is the tax refund that many of our taxpayers went through last year. And so that is again tied to just the specific period of time following the disaster. So those 3 months at the end of last year, and only those 3 months applying just to last year's tax year. So when we talk about everything this morning, we're talking in the context of January 1st of this year, who owned it, what was the condition, just all the details about it are going to play out in what is shown in the tax roll. Now, the biggest vocabulary that seems to have tripped folks up is what the Department of Revenue, the State Department of Revenue, calls deletions. And deletions does mean the typical application is when something literally gets deleted from the tax roll, whether that's the house entirely, in a normal circumstance, you tear down the house, so we recognize the house is gone, or even the parcel, whether a split or combine has occurred, and so there's an actual tax folio that is gone from the system, and it has some impact on value at some level. Obviously, in a combine, you're going to delete and then add because you'll have a new value for this new bigger parcel. And the way that the Department of Revenue asks for all of that to be reported is in a kind of a progressive analysis with all of those additions and subtractions, and that ends up with a net change for the total value of whatever the taxing authority is, the county, the city, the special districts, in y'all's case out on Captiva. And what is obviously unique about this year is not only do we have an extraordinary number of deletions, but deletions mean all kinds of things. It means from the awning on the front of the building that's now gone to a complete loss of the property. Some physical change has occurred in the property that resulted in a loss of value. So to give you some scale, countywide, our deletion count now, deletion impacted, again, understanding what I mean when I say that in total, about 19,000 condo units fall into this category. And then about, I have been saying 12,000, it's crept up to about 13,000 of, single family, mobile home, cooperative, everybody who's in a single owner context residentially. That's about 13,000 parcels. And then everything else, which is literally everything else, is about 1,800 parcel counts. That's all your commercial, all your multifamily, all your hotels, motels, etc.
Hey, can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question? When you refer to deletion, and it's Bruce McDonald here, are you referring to a complete deletion or could it be partial?
Partial. So for Department of Revenue's purposes, they just want the total sum of all of the real property features that were in the 2022 tax roll that have now been deleted from the 2023 tax roll. And so again, that could cover from as small as the awning on the front of your house as a feature, all the way up to all the structures on the property. So it's
But it does not include, Matt, it doesn't include landscape. Is that correct?
Correct. Only items of real property that we value. I mean, those of you know, I've got 20 years of real estate appraisal and private practice. You can make analyses of value for landscaping, particularly if you talk about historic features like banyan trees and whatnot. They have value, but they don't get captured in our tax roll process. I mean, that when our tax roll process is developed, it's done at a mass appraisal scale. So you're not chasing the smallest variables. The mass appraisal model focuses on the biggest variables that matter, and we all know those. What's your view? How big is your house? How many bathrooms do you have? Do you have a pool or not? And where's your location? And once you get beyond 5 variables, get any statisticians in the room, you're just chasing slices that aren't going to make any difference to the whole. Our models go as deep as sometimes 10 or 12 variables, but landscaping usually, it definitely isn't a mass scale implication. So you're not going to see that captured.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you say you lost your roof,
Mm-hmm.
would that be a deletion?
Yes, it will show up as a diminishment in the physical characteristics of the property. So it'll get captured as a slice of value. Now, in that case, in the individual features of a home, depending on it, like if you go and ask us for our reports, we have to be very specific about what we ask to be printed out. So if you called me and said, give me everything that's been destroyed, our data staff isn't automatically going to pull all of those depreciation factors in all the house, just the roof, or just the front porch, or just the damage to the pool cage. That's not going to get captured in that. If you just ask them in general terms, layman's terms, give me everything that got destroyed, they're going to pull the report that gives you everything where the building itself was gone.
Matt, could I just say, how does your office know that information? So for example, if someone had 4 feet of flooding and lost half the drywall in the house and part of their roof, do you have someone going out to each of these properties, or you only know about that if someone asks for a tax abatement of some sort through the process that was set up earlier as a result of the hurricane?
Well, it's a combination. So I just so happened to be getting ready for Reese today and doing a presentation, and let me see if the share screen will work. Share screen 2. And this is a question I expect to get. Everybody see this PowerPoint now?
Yeah.
All right. So clearly this is a snapshot. This is the aerial from January of 22. We fly the county every single year. We don't use satellite imagery, not only because it's not proprietary, but also it doesn't give us the level of detail that we're able to achieve with an aerial flight. We can get down to 6 or even 4-inch resolution by having them flown ourselves. So we fly those every year. We try to do it in the first week of January so that it's contemporaneous with the value date. Last year, we flew an extra flight. We flew it 3 days after the storm. So the first thing we did, once we got stabilized for our staff purposes, and we're back in the office probably about the second week of October, we had these delivered to us, and we began to do comparisons between the 22 aerial and the October 3 days after the storm aerial, and tagging all the properties that had obvious impact from the storm. And using that, you've probably heard me use the 100,000 parcel quote around. That's where we drew this lasso, essentially, of the geography we knew we would have to focus on for this tax roll, even more particularly than our normal responsibility. So taking all of that aerial data, and this is the overhead 2-dimensional snapshot. If you go to our website, if you go to your individual property, you can also click on the pictometry tab, and you can see a 3-dimensional picture. So when that aerial plane, and that's another advantage of flying it ourselves rather than satellite, it comes in and takes multiple angles from all 4 sides of the house. So we get not quite a Google Street View because it's obviously still overhead, but we got a 3-dimensional unit. So as the staff first went through and tagged every single property that you could see in the 2-dimensional layer had the potential for damage that needed to be addressed, then the field staff worked through November and December using those 3-dimensional views to see really what properties did we not have to go visit. I mean, we started that first flush when you heard me back at the first week to talk about 10 and 15,000 properties that were totally destroyed or effectively totally destroyed. That was the result of going through the aerials and using the 3-dimensional identification to see we don't need to go visit this property personally because it's coming off the tax roll. And then what we did was take the reports as we started to process those tax refund requests, as well as just our general call to the community for their information. This is the current snapshot of all the confirmed. So this is people have reported to us that they experienced flood damage, and we have gone and field confirmed that is the case. We took this as well as all the information that everybody gave us, the fire districts, State Department of Emergency Management, the county, FEMA, etc. And we modeled the full impact that we should expect to see of some kind of effect from the flood throughout Lee County. And that led us to where we're at right now. This is our current snapshot. What are we? clicking towards, this is a pretty heavy year. So to give you perspective, we got about 550,000 properties. We got to visit a property once every 5 years. So rough math, we got to do 100,000 touches every single year. And you can see from this report here, we're over 200,000 interactions now throughout the county. So I will definitely give some kudos to my staff because they've worked double time to do that. And then here's the stats I gave you all a minute ago about where we're at. And we closed out with about just shy of 19,000 refunds. So back to the question, how do we identify all of that? The first run was to use all the technology that we could, not only to make it more efficient, but we also didn't want to get in people's way, particularly in November and December. You were still working on recovery efforts. We didn't need our field staff driving around and making it even more difficult for everybody. But here's the reality. We fully expect that there are still a not insignificant number of homeowners who have not communicated with us. And that's just comparing this, what we've modeled as the likely extent of the impact versus what we've communicated with. There's still a delta there. And we think when we send out the trim notice here in a couple of weeks, we will get, our normal interactions after trim are somewhere probably between 8,000 and 10,000 property owners. I'm expecting we're going to have double that at least that we'll have to field over those 3 weeks of trim. And then the heartbreaker will be the number of people that, and it happens every year, they ignore the trim notice and they don't call us until they get the tax bill in November. And by the time you get the tax bill, once trim closes in September, I lose all of my discretion. The only changes I can make at that point are those that are specifically authorized by statute, which is really limited to factual errors. We say you got a pool, but you don't have a pool. There's nothing to argue about there. So does that
So
cover
the key
David?
point, Matt, the key point you're making is that you have to, if you don't agree with the valuation because you think you have, very significant damage, and you don't feel the property appraiser has got an appraisal that reflects that amount of damage, people have to react within a month of receiving their trim notice. Is that correct?
They have 25 days from the time it hits the mail. And we're right up against the deadlines for everything, just trying both to facilitate everybody that's impacted. We had a couple of districts yesterday. The deadline was last night to get us the millages, and a couple that were right at the deadline. So we should get it still on time out in the mail, or at least to the printer this week, Thursday, Friday, which puts it in the mail next week, which then puts the 25-day endpoint sometime around the second week of September. Yep. Yeah. Tony, you're on mute.
Okay, there we go. Hey, Matt, first of all, thanks for coming on. This is very helpful. The question I have is, you talked about destroyed, but you didn't talk about uninhabitable. Now, with contractors being overloaded as they are, many homes are being fixed up, but are still uninhabitable. How does the tax look at uninhabitable versus destroyed or damaged? How do you do that? You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. So top line answer, you the property is evaluated based upon its ability to be used for the purpose for which it was designed. So most of the time that context is people build a new house and they try not to get the certificate of occupancy till after the 1st of January, but that's not the standard. We'll go out on the 1st of January, and if the house is substantially done, the air conditioner's there, the toilets can flush, and the only difference here is somebody's still got to do an inspection, it's going to go on the tax roll because it was substantially complete and able to be used for the purpose. So do the inverse of that. If you can't live there, then it's going to be classified as uninhabitable. And the way that it gets valued inside that bucket of uninhabitable just depends on its physical condition. So, we've got these 19,000 plus condos. not all of those are destroyed, windows blown out, roof gone. A lot of those are complexes where all the mechanical rooms were washed away. The buildings are structurally sound. The interiors were not damaged, but there's no electricity, there's no elevator. They can't be occupied legally. And so they get, essentially we've tagged all those units with a $10 value for the period of time while they're going to be in that criteria. And then the rest where you have physical damage, we're doing something new. We have traditionally never, well, let me back up. In a condo, obviously, you're a fractional owner of the land and the building. Collectively, all of the unit owners make up the association that's the actual owner of the land and the exterior of the building. And because the units trade as the condo units, the easiest way to value it, the logical way to value it is just compare the sales of the condo units. Well, we get a scenario, and we've got a lot of these, where you've got a 50-year-old, 60-year-old condo building that's had the roof blown off and the windows blown in. And the truth is, if that was a single owner property, that is a tear down building. And what you really own is 3 acres in the Gulf of Mexico. And you're a 1/80th share fractional owner of that land. So we are weighing what the physical condition, the likely financial feasibility of rebuilding is. And for all those that aren't, for all these properties where the condo is uninhabitable, we're turning around and trying to develop, we are developing a land value for those, and then pro rata breaking it back out to reflect. So there's not a zero associated with those. And the same thing, it's trying to create a parallel context that you have in the single family context, where even if the house is uninhabitable, they still own the land still has value. And particularly in y'all's jurisdictions, the land is the majority of the value anyway, except for the most exclusive properties. We might get some parity, but by and large on the islands, obviously the land is where the value's at. So that's not lost in this. That's still being captured for each one of those properties.
Matt, I'm confused. And so I'm just going to try to get some clarity here. You guys did a great job for 2022, and from the time of the hurricane to the end of December, people were able to apply for a refund, and they did, and they got checks, and that worked. And that goes through the end of December of 2022. There's been, as far as I know, no way to contact your office and say that one's house has been uninhabitable from, say, January till today, for example. They're rebuilding that. So you have 8 months of uninhabitability in your house, say on Captiva. What do you do? I mean, what should the homeowner do with that information? Is that where you say we have 25 days from the trim notice to advise the county that the house has been uninhabitable for 8 months, and then figure there's some calculation that reduces taxes in relation to that? Or what is the obligation of the homeowner to do if they couldn't get back into the house as of, say, today?
Yeah, so that goes back to the basic premise of how we do the tax roll, and the fact that the refund last year is one of only 2 aberrations from the norm. So the norm is that you are assessed based upon January 1st. So regardless of what happens throughout the rest of the year, the other 364 days, what the condition of the home was, what the value of the home was, what the use of the property was on January 1st is what controls the way it's treated in the tax roll. So if it was uninhabitable on the 1st, even if they moved in on the 2nd, pretty low odds of that being that fine a condition difference, based on what I explained to Tony a minute ago about how we evaluate inhabitability. But let's just say, for the purpose of argument, that you were able to suddenly make it habitable January 2nd. You'd get the whole year based on the fact that it wasn't habitable on January 1st. And so let's think about a place where that really could happen, not absurdly, for those condos I just described, where you can't live in them because there's no elevator, there's no power. If they suddenly get all that shipped in and the contractor shows up on January 2nd of next year at this point, January 2nd, 2024, and fixes it all, they're going to get a whole year's uninhabitable because that still wasn't in place on January 1st. So that for all of 23, 24 going forward, It's all going to be based on their condition January 1st. That refund in 22 was a specific departure from this normal tax roll process that gave you a partial year refund based on post-storm damages. Now, how do they communicate with us? Well, trim is the time that's really, trim is really the notice, this is your last chance for the tax roll, but it doesn't prevent you from communicating with us at any point before that. And so you see over here, the very top, the top banner on our webpage. And if people don't do that, they've always got the contact us. You can go to the live chat here. You can go to our contact us tab down here. You can call us and you can come down and visit with us directly. If through any of those methods, they can let us know whatever's going on. So if you click here, it just opens up this page. Now, this has been updated since last December, when it just clicked open an email box because we were in the very beginning. But this will be, if you check your tax bill, there's a specific alternate key there that you can click in, and that will help us if you use that, because it auto loads all of your information you give us, pictures, story, whatever, directly to your tax record. So we don't have to separately handle that in the background. But if you don't have this, you can still use the email and just tell us the story about your property so that we can then go through and tag all of that information to the property in question. And it's, just tell us the things that'll help us identify what property you're talking about and what are the issues that concern you as the property owner.
So if, just to be clear, so if you requested a tax refund for the 2022 and you received it through December 31st, 2022, from what I hear you're saying, there's really nothing more you need to do, because what the assessed property, what the refund included was the assessment of the property at the end of the year, which then would be applied on January 1st, unless the tax office saw some change. And therefore, your trim notice would reflect that uninhabitability in this year's trim notice, is basically what you're saying.
Absolutely. At the risk of the exception, when you deal with big data, I'm sure there's a scenario somewhere in the set where we will have messed it up. But my instructions, and they've been clearly understood and implemented, is if someone qualified as uninhabitable through December 31st, we're going to classify them that way just January 1st, because there's no scenario they had resolved those issues in 24 hours.
That's very clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
For those people that have damage, but their house was inhabitable, and they didn't claim a refund, those ones, we ought to go in and into the website here and hit that click here to report our damage.
It will make it extremely helpful for us. Now,
Okay.
if it was visible from the exterior, and I would say overwhelmingly the properties on the islands, there's a correlation between visible exterior damage and interior, right? Where we're worried we're going to have the most interactions is, for example, in the South Cape, where it was almost exclusively a flood event in all 60s concrete block houses. So we can't see from the outside that anything went wrong with it. But everybody who had exterior damage would have been tagged through that aerial review. But we're not, if think about the scenarios, like, okay, we could see that the shutters came off and some of your shingles came off, but we didn't see that, it blew up underneath your stilt house and blew out the underside and rained inside your kitchen for 2 days, right? That's the kind of stuff we need reported.
Got it.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt, Jeff Powell here, Fire Chief. I know you're probably getting there and just some of the questions that have prevented you, but can you just make sure we touch on the rollback rate and what these deletions that we've just had all this discussion about, kind of what that actually does? I know it's, I know it's a confusing topic for everybody. I mean, I deal with it. I know how to do the math and I understand the implication, but just what that reality is actually going to look like and not be totally reality, right?
Sure, absolutely. So the rollback rate is obviously the millage that's calculated by DOR to reflect no net change in taxes, in actual taxes. And it's an approximation, right? There's so many different things that change about each of our individual situations that even when you take a mass appraisal, you take all the value all together and then you calculate losses and gains and you come up with a new value, and then you reflect, you know, how much taxes were last year. And so what's the millage that would give you that same amount? That would still not mean that when you apply it to an individual house, it will absolutely result in the same amount of taxation. But the attempt in how DOR has done it is to create that scenario for the individual taxpayers. And we never really had to challenge the theory of how the statute was assembled until the scale of this disaster. Even in previous ones, it didn't show up the way it did this time, just because of the scale of difference. But the rollback rate is attempting to replicate the same taxes, not for the jurisdiction, but for the individual taxpayers. So what that means in a scenario where, for example, I just talk about Sanibel. Sanibel's lost 40% of its taxable value. Regardless of how DOR calculated its math, the net result means if you're going to collect the same amount of money this year as you did last year, you're going to have to raise the taxes on the remaining 60% to make up for the loss of that 40%. And that dynamic, how much that the impact is of raising the taxes between those two, that's what the rollback rate is trying to capture. As the chief knows, it's not perfect, and they didn't do themselves any favors by developing a form that is confusing on its face, and you need to sit and go through a lot of mental gymnastics before you get around to agreeing that what they say they intend to do is probably what it is calculating, but it does it in such a confusing way that even I had to go back and have arguments with my staff for about 2 days before we arrived at a conclusion. But the take home is the rollback rate is trying to capture the delta between what you collected last year and what you're going to have to collect this year from those taxpayers that remain. And in those jurisdictions where you have such an enormous loss of taxable value, you're going to have, as a result, a pretty big gap in the rollback rate. It's going to be eye-catching as it has been for many of the jurisdictions impacted that way.
Yeah, so to put that in perspective for us here on Captiva, so our operating value for the island is 1.7 billion. And then we had another $251 million worth of deletions for the island. It was about 250, use round numbers, 251 million in deletions, and then about another 8 million in additions. So that comes out 243 million is our total in deletions. So that takes the actual adjusted value up to 1.958 billion for the island. And that's what the rollback rate that we have to advertise off of is based off of. The anomaly comes in where he said we try and basically get the same amount as the previous year. As a taxing district, we only get to tax off of the 1.7 billion. So that leaves us with a big shortfall and almost 400,000 in actual revenue and proceeds to the district. So that's gonna have us show on your tax notice and in the newspaper, that's gonna show a 42.86% increase in taxes. But in reality, our actual budget is not increasing 42%. We're only increasing our budget itself by about 8% due to inflation, lack of reserves from the storm damage, etc. So that was why I really wanted Matt to kind of explain it from his end, because I've explained it to myself, I've explained it to my board, and it's still confusing. And I look at these numbers on a daily basis. So I know as a property owner, if you get a tax bill or you read in the newspaper or the Islander that, hey, Captiva is raising the fire district taxes 42.86%, you're going to be like, what? 40%? It's kind of, it's a mathematical anomaly that we're looking at. As you said, it is going to be a shocking value. I will tell you, we're obviously not the only ones. He speaks as the county. It could definitely be worse. If you look, Sanibel's increasing theirs by 69%. And they're right next to us. So, the important thing is just to try and convey as best as we can as a taxing district. And I know the CEPD is another taxing district. I believe they're on the call as well. But those deletions, that $250 million worth of deletions for the island is what that drives that percentage that you're going to see in that increase, which isn't 100% accurate. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the difference. In typical years, you can say, the change in the millage rate, whatever that ends up being, is going to track very closely to the actual difference in taxes paid by the property owner. But because of the dynamic here, you're going to have a much higher rate in order to collect the same, essentially, amount of taxes, even before you talk about the inflation question. And so, yeah, there's going to be a real perception delta on, how much your districts are spending versus what their rate has to be in order just to stay in operation based on how much properties come off. Now, the thing to recognize, obviously, is considering that almost half of the deletions are condos, and like we talked about with those condos, all those buildings that are structurally sound and able to be occupied, except for the fact that there's some physical restriction, electrical, mechanical, etc. We expect to see a lot of that come back on in a pretty strong way January 1st. So for many jurisdictions, this may end up just being a single year event. Obviously, out on the islands collectively, it's more likely to be a multi-year event. But the other thing that's going to happen is we're going to capture in the January 1/24 tax roll all of this market activity that's occurring on the islands in 2023, and it's pretty strong, as everybody on this call probably recognizes and sees happening in the market.
But Matt, for a property owner who did not have damage, are you saying that he is going to pay significantly more taxes than he did the prior year because he has to make up for the deficit of what you're going to have? Because so many people aren't going to have taxable values, or going to have very significant declines in taxable values due to hurricane loss?
If the goal of the district is to provide the same level of service, then that's what the net result is going to be. And so the only way around that, as individual districts, is obviously to look to the legislature to backfill that operating cost at the state expense rather than the local taxpayer expense, or basically reduce level of service. I mean, that,
yeah,
and my impression on particularly the two districts out there in Captiva, y'all don't have excessively indulgent service levels. So you'd basically be cutting off some level of operation in either of those if you didn't fully fund the operation.
Yeah, and I can tell you from a fire district standpoint, as Matt just mentioned, we have applied for multiple avenue streams of recapturing some of that revenue loss that we've experienced, some of the funds we've lost due to damage to the structure and whatnot. The unfortunate thing is none of those revenue streams are going to be funded or available or even really decided prior to having to set this year's budget and millage rate. So all those funds aren't going to come in until we've already started and set our next fiscal year. So, those are kind of unknowns, and they could end up being almost like he's saying as properties coming back online on valuations for next year. So this may be one of those years specific to Captiva where, yeah, this year might look rough. That percentage increase might look rough. Some property owners, may be paying more because of the deleted structures, but then come next year, as we all hope, all these come back online and then, not to use windfall, but there could be then excess that can then help next year and then bring back in line with where we need to be. I mean, that's the overall goal and hope. But we have definitely looked at every other avenue as far as recapturing that revenue loss for the district.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I have one question, Matt, one question came into me. I just want to ask if your structure didn't suffer significant damage that you could see, but the elevator is not working, and the only way you can get to your home is via elevator because of your own personal condition, and the elevator companies are really backed up, and it's going to take a while before they can fix these elevators. Is that something that they should report to you and basically explain that the home is uninhabitable until the elevator is fixed?
They certainly should report it, and we'll have to evaluate the situation. I think that the context, just my opinion, and taking for granted that it's been implemented consistently across the board throughout the whole tax roll. Under Florida building code, I think you can go to 3 stories, maybe 4 stories without an elevator. So clearly anything over that, if you don't have an elevator, isn't meeting building code. So that's an easy metric. If you have a low-rise condo, a 1 or 2 story condo, and everything works, the power all works, you can use the facility, there's no physical damage. The only limitation is the elevator isn't working. I would not classify that as uninhabitable, but there is an impact, because if you look at the valuation ratios of apartment complexes, condo complexes, where you don't have elevators, and so the marketability, the universe of buyers is obviously smaller for the upper floors. So there does end up being a price differential between those, and we'll need to reflect that in how we evaluate buildings that have a long-term loss of elevator in that circumstance. I hope that kind of broke it out for them.
Yep, thank you.
Matt, we have a couple of questions from the audience. I think you're typing to answer one of them. The one below it is, how does this work for commercial properties that were not fixed because they were getting insurance?
It works all the same. So obviously we spend most of our time talking in the residential context, because that's about 400,000 or 500,000 properties in the county. But the way you are evaluated is the same dynamic. Can the property be used for the purpose for which it was designed, and what are the challenges associated with it? That's why we really, on the reporting side, we have not been overly prescriptive with check boxes, et cetera, because we really need people to tell us their story and identify the things that every property's got some unique situation to it, right? I mean, there's obviously parallels, but we leave it open-ended so that the property owner can tell us what's going on with their property. So same dynamic. Contact us anytime. Use that portal. All the tax bills get that alternate key, as well as the direct email, and then all the regular ways to communicate, chat and phone and come in. And then the next one is, would having South Seas rebuilt and back operational help with the large deficit? Yes, that would be an easy answer. South Seas is obviously a huge chunk of the taxable value on the island, and the damage it's suffering from is obviously a big part of what you see reflected here.
Do we have any other questions from the audience, Ken?
One just popped up. Thank you for the answer. Will this be available for 2024? Should the home still be uninhabitable?
Yes, so the uninhabitability from an annual tax roll evaluation is always standard. So this isn't a reflection of just the storm. If anything happened to you, if you came home from Christmas vacation and your house flooded and the whole place is completely unoccupiable, because the hot water heater broke, you should tell us on January 1st, because you couldn't live there. And you should have that reflected in your taxable value for the year. So the evaluation for the normal tax roll process is always the same, regardless of hurricane circumstances or anything else. It's what is the ownership value and condition of the property on January 1st. That the tax refund, why I describe it as a aberration from the normal paradigm, is because It's just specific to the remainder of the year following a specific natural disaster that comes into play. But that closed, that refund statute only applied to those 3 months after the storm in 2022, and the window to apply for that closed in May of this year. So that all the refund work is done and closed. And so now we're only looking on a going forward basis at January 1st to January 1st. Next question. I haven't done anything about this whole tax issue. What do I do? Kathy, I would say if you can see the screen, if you're comfortable with chat, click there. You can go to contact us and call us. I'm assuming you don't want to drive all the way into town unless you already are. Feel free to stop by and visit with us. But you're going to get the same team. So this isn't some offshore group. It's the same 20 folks that you see in person at our public service area man the contact points as well. And they'll walk you through all the specifics regarding your individual situation, Kathy.
Hey, Matt, Jeff Powell again. Can you just touch on these properties that do have these deletions, whether it be a condo, single family, whatever it is on this tax roll? Let's just use single family home that was considered deleted on this tax roll. Say it's back fully operational as intended, all repairs are made come January 1 next year. How does that valuation come back online, and how does that correlate if it's a homesteaded property as well?
All right, so from the valuation perspective, we're going to use those same tools that we used to evaluate where the damage was. We're going to create a compare contrast, right? We're going to take the whole bucket of properties that are not fully on the tax roll this year, and those will be the first priority in the first quarter of 24 to go and evaluate what's their current physical condition. We'll use the aerial flight that will run hopefully the first week of January to make a first pass at that and see which properties appear. And we also compare that with all the permit data that we get from everybody. So all the jurisdictions have an agreement, they give us the permit data. So that also gets flagged as, the county or the city say that this house is repaired and back occupiable. So it's going to go to the top of the stack right away. So just that normal field process, but prioritizing the ones that have come off the tax roll in some way, shape, or form this year. Those are going to go to the top of the stack. And then how does that affect homestead? So if you are homesteaded, the key point is communication with our office, particularly if you're in an uninhabitable situation. Lee County has automatic renewal. So every homestead property, everybody should remember getting their postcard from us in March that says if anything's changed, you're required to tell us, but if nothing's changed, great. You don't do anything, we don't do anything. That's how we process. We got about 225,000 homestead accounts. So we save a lot of taxpayer money by not reevaluating every one of those every year. We focus on new people and everybody that tells us, and then we have a secondary system that evaluates. People forget. I mean, we find most of the homestead fraud is not intentional. It's people forgetting that they needed to move their homestead. And so we're always looking to clean up. We compare the records, driver's license address, voter address, et cetera, to see where there's a dissonance, and we investigate what's going on. When you've got a scenario where you're uninhabitable, what it's really going to come down to is if you have to tear down the house. If you have to tear down the house, then you really need to talk to us and tell us that you intend to keep that property as your homestead, or tell us where you're going to move to in the interim while that house is being rebuilt, if where you're moving to is somewhere you own. That's the easiest thing, is to move your homestead from one house you own to another house you own. And if you're in the financial situation to do that, it makes the process the simplest. If you can't do that, so you're renting, for example, while you're rebuilding the house, you have the standard 3-year time period for portability. And we only will really need to worry about any potential loss of homestead if it's going to take more than 3 years from the time you tear down the house till the time you get back into it. And I suspect we're going to have to, based on just how long it's taking and how big this disaster is, I know we're going to have properties that are going to take more than 3 years. We're going to have to work with the legislature to figure out how we don't inadvertently punish people, have them lose their homestead because they couldn't physically get back in time. But for now, we're just operating under the portability standard that's in the Constitution that gives you 3 years to move from one to the next, essentially. That's working for the moment, but we're going to have to solve that, I suspect, in the next year or two.
Another question came up, do commercial properties, i.e. timeshares, eligible?
Yes, they are. We evaluate timeshares the same way as we do hotels, motels, and condos. And it's going to be, in terms of the physical structure, analysis of timeshares is very special and interesting and controversial. But although thankfully not in Lee County, traditionally it hasn't been. If you're the Orange County and Osceola County property appraiser, it's a nightmare because you have about 500,000 timeshares. But the physical features and whether or not you're classified as uninhabitable and the way it flows through is the exact same standards we've talked about for all the other property types. Did we understand that regarding an uninhabitable condo situation, that a land value will be added to the valuation? Yes. So on the condo situation, we have traditionally not assigned an independent land value because the condo units trade as condo units, and baked into the price of the condo unit is the value of the pro rata fractional interest in the land and the exterior of the building, right? Well, if we have a scenario where the building is functionally it's going to have to be torn down, and particularly the scenarios where the building is going to have to be torn down, that's obvious. We're not going to create a legal fiction in which the property is worth nothing to anybody, because that's not the reality. The reality is that let's say you're an 80 unit condo, you've got 80 fractional interest owners in the land at that point. And so we're going to capture that in the scenarios where the properties are not inhabitable, but the structure is still good. We're evaluating that on a case by case basis as to how we capture that. Because again, we don't want to create top line. We're required to develop a fair and equitable tax roll. Equity in the case of tax roll is that every property owner is assessed in a situation, in the proper situation relative to everyone else in the tax roll. So it really, what that means at a 10,000 foot level is I don't actually have to get the number right. I could say that a property is worth $100. As long as the property is worth $100, I then have a property that's worth $1, and the ratio, the relationship between those two is correct. And so you take that theory and spread it through the whole tax roll. With the condos, we're working hard to avoid a scenario where the condos are treated inequitably, not recognizing the fact that they still have value in the land, which is the paradigm we're obviously capturing in the single family in the commercial context, where the building may come off the tax roll, but the land is still there. The land still has value. So we're working on a case by case basis to make sure we capture the value one way or the other.
Okay, well, we've run considerably over the amount of time allotted, but this is an important topic, and I just want to make sure everybody got their questions in before moving on. So are there any other questions from panel members before we let Matt go?
Hi, this is John with CEPD. It's just a quick question about the advertisement. I know as long as we have the required information, are we able to add like a fine print line so it might not be so shocking to people who read the increase in the newspaper ad?
So the advertising and the trim notice is heavily dictated by the statute, so that they are identical in form and substance in every jurisdiction. So to the extent that you can add anything to it, we'd have to review the specific circumstance. But in our experience with DOR, the answer is 99% going to be no.
Yeah, John, as I'm told, the short answer is to that is no. There's a specific format on what that advertisement has to be, and there's no additions for special circumstances.
Right, absolutely. Thank you.
So now you will note on this trim notice, we are going to add a small box that is generalized to everyone's situation, that identifies that there was a hurricane this is a unique year. Here's the way to contact us and talk to us specifically. So you will see this year's trim notice be a little different, but it has to speak to every taxpayer equally. I guess is the way I'm saying it, is the way we feel like that little addition is going to be consistent with the statutes.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, well, Matt, we really appreciate the time that you spent with us this morning. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely. Thank you all. And anytime you'll have any other questions, glad to pop in and talk about it.
Okay, Matt, thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, and Jeff, thank you for suggesting that we add this to our agenda. It was very informative.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I know we're already way over on time, so I'll keep my additional comment as short as possible for you guys. I know that was a lot. But as Mr. Caldwell stated, on the islands, like he said, we don't excessively tax you guys. We never have. We don't plan to. With that said, with that valuation he just gave you, all the rebates that have been given, and tax rebates from last year, the fire district's budget was basically pulled 125,000 in rebates alone. With that $251 million loss in deletions, that's another 423,000 straight off the top line of our budget. That those two combined all comes out of next year's budget. So we're over $500,000 off of our budget, and the total operating expenses of the district are only about $3.5 million. So as he said, the only two options you have in these types of circumstances are to reduce and almost eliminate services, or do the tax increase and provide the same level of service to you guys.
Yeah.
I can tell you the fire district has no intentions of reducing the level of service we provide for you guys out here. And unfortunately on your tax bill, that'll show in advertising a 42% increase. As I mentioned, we're not increasing, that's the biggest point to get across, is we're not increasing our budget by 42.86%. So that's the biggest thing to get across to you guys. We're actually reducing, we reduced our taxes last year due to the cost of prices and revenues. We had some rollover the year before. Unfortunately, Ian is what it is. It caused a lot of damage. It's a perfect storm with us not increasing operating last year. So between the refunds, the reduction we did in taxes last year, and the hurricane, this year is a little uncomfortable for an advertisement in the newspaper. But
Yeah.
again, it definitely could have been worse. Sanibel is much worse at 69%, and Fort Myers Beach has got even more. So unfortunately, I say consider ourselves lucky, even though it doesn't look like it on paper.
Right.
But I think Jeff, you guys need to communicate better. I would communicate, hey, my budget is going up 8%. Your allocation is going up 40% because there's less tax base to spread the cost over.
Yeah, so and that's what John had asked, if we're allowed to communicate that in our advertisements, and
Right.
we're not. State statute limits the exact language that goes on the advertisement. We have no ability to change that. So the only ability we have is these types of meetings,
Right.
our board meetings, when we have our budget meetings, avenues like that, our website, those types of things. We don't have the ability to mass show that's an anomaly on there. That's dictated by Department of Revenue, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we're gonna have the same, like the education assessment, the library assessment, the CEP. They're all gonna be like that. They're all gonna have this.
Yeah, it's not going to be, it's not a
confusion.
fire district specific thing. It's not a Captiva specific thing. I
Right.
just knew that we had the opportunity to have Mr. Caldwell attend our meeting and explain it to you guys, so everybody could hear exactly. Because I said, when I look at these forms and I fill out my State Department of Revenue forms, and I'm like, this can't be right, right? And I call our attorney and I call Department of Revenue, and they're like, well, that's how the statute is interpreted, and we've never in the past 35 years had a deletion on a line that you're supposed to subtract. So nobody thought the math was right. We all thought the form was wrong. Unfortunately, we've all been corrected that that is the proper interpretation of state statute.
Got it.
Okay, well, if this turns into a lot of confusion, Jeff, with property owners, we will do our best to communicate, with our email audience.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, anybody can call, can come by, can send me an email at any time. Please feel free to reach out if you still don't understand it. If it's a property appraiser type issue, you can reach out to Mr. Caldwell's office, as he stated. Both of us, anybody, will do our best to explain and show you whatever you need. I don't have specific property data. I can't relate it to an individual property. We don't have access to that report until after the fact. So if you want to know specifically, hey, what does my tax bill look like? We don't have the copy of that.
Right.
I've requested the report of what the deletions report is of the 251 million. And I've only got a high level view that basically says 251 deletions, 8 million in new construction. So I don't have that actual breakdown of which property has which amount that's considered a deletion out here. I have not received that from the property appraiser's office yet.
Okay.
Hi, this is Linda. From the CEPD's point of view, and Bob, feel free to jump in. We have the same issue. So if we send out a blast, what we should probably do is to have a coordinated communication between the various taxing districts on the island, because it's happening to everybody.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's move on. David, you're going to give us an update on the current state of the land use issue and what's going on. So have at it.
I just want to tell Ken Gooderham that James Evans, I think, is on the call, and Ken Suarez, I see he's there, and Michael Bell, who's the attorney for the timeshares on South Seas. If you just want to promote them to panelists, they may have something to say on this after I give.
James has a 10 o'clock meeting and he's leaving, so he didn't want to promote.
Okay, very good. Okay. So let me just fill people in, as everybody knows, and I'll try to catch up on the time. Everybody knows that on June 20th, the Board of County Commissioners continued or postponed the hearing on the proposed amendments that would affect building heights and density on Captiva. They postponed that till September 5th and September 6th. And during that period of time, the staff was instructed by the Board of County Commissioners, and it's not clear they were fully instructed, but the staff interpreted as an instruction to hold community meetings on Captiva and Sanibel between the period of June 20th and the September 5th continuance date. And so the county did hold a meeting on Captiva on July 13th, where I think people know that members of the Captiva Community Panel, SCCF, the Council of Associations at South Seas, and various other, the CCA representative, various other, and Sandy was there also, representatives of Captiva basically expressed their understanding of the amendments and why those amendments have been virtually opposed by everybody on Captiva and Sanibel. On August 2nd, there was another meeting held, county meeting held at Big Arts, where representatives from the panel and the CCA were on stage, and they also gave their a full-blown explanation of why the community has opposed these amendments. And what we've learned is that the county staff feels it has been instructed to listen carefully to the communities of Captiva and Sanibel, which they did on July 13th and August 2nd. And they believe it is their responsibility at this point to compile all the objections in a comprehensive way from the communities to those amendments and present those objections to the Board of County Commissioners, which they will do, they believe at this point, at a workshop of the Board of County Commissioners on August 29th. the afternoon of August 29th. I believe it's 1 or 1:30. And at that point, once the Board of County Commissioners hear the results of what the staff compiled from our meetings on Sanibel and Captiva, the Board of County Commissioners will then be in a position to decide what they want to do at that point. They could ask the staff to change the proposed amendments and come back with a different set of amendments, and then they would probably be required to further postpone the September 5th and 6th hearings. Or they could decide that they listen to the staff and say thank you very much and do nothing and proceed as originally scheduled on September 5th and September 6th, which I think would be very doubtful at this point and hopefully would be doubtful. Or they could decide, given all the concerns that were raised on Captiva and Sanibel, and given all the objections that have been articulated, and given all the complications that maybe weren't thought of when the amendments were first proposed, and given the changes in other provisions of the Land Development Code, which have come to light during the course of this process, maybe the Board of County Commissioners will just on September 5th vote these particular amendments, reject these particular amendments, vote no, and ask the staff to come back with a different package and basically start all over again once, because they've received so much input from the community. So that's where we are at this point. There is one more public meeting on August 9th in Fort Myers. I think that's going to be a much less formal meeting than the prior ones that were held on Sanibel and Captiva, but it will give an opportunity for anyone on Sanibel, Captiva, or anywhere else in the county to interact with staff and make some sort of statement. I'm not sure at this point exactly what the format would be, but I am pretty confident that the Community Development Department and the County Attorney's Office and all the pertinent staff of Lee County have a very clear understanding of what the objections are to these amendments from the communities of Captiva and Sanibel. Just so it's clear, and based upon our priorities, based upon what the panel has agreed to, we have continued as a panel and as a community requested that the building heights on Captiva don't get changed, that they still stay at basically 28 feet above base flood elevation, and that the changes that apply to South Seas, which is increasing density, potential increasing density for hotel rooms, and increasing potentially building heights at South Seas, and those related amendments, that those amendments be withdrawn from this set of countywide amendments, because it is our view they don't really belong there. They more properly belong as a proposal from a single property owner and not a county initiated amendment that only affects Captiva and South Seas. Okay, so that's basically where we are. I think a lot of people have attended either virtually or in person those two meetings. And obviously our principles are on the website, and I think everybody on Captiva understands where the community stands on these issues. We have retained an attorney, as everybody knows. We retained an attorney in conjunction with other stakeholders on Captiva, and we're working closely with them. And I can only say that the legal strategy, which I'm not in a position to discuss in this meeting, but there are basically, you want to think about it in 3 tranches, that our legal representation, the lawyers are looking at what the legal problems are with going forward with these amendments prior to September 5th or at September 5th, and they are working to compile the unlawful or the potentially unlawful aspects of the county going forward with these amendments. And our hope is, as I've said before, is that these amendments are not passed on September 5th because the Board of County Commissioners understands how problematic they are. The second legal issue is if in fact they get passed on September 5th, then what legal actions will be taken because the passing them on September 5th would have questionable legality associated with the passage of those amendments on September 5th. And then finally, if in fact it gets passed, and if in fact South Seas is invited to do a amended plan development, which would increase heights on South Seas and Captiva and increase density on South Seas and therefore Captiva and set a unfortunate precedent, then there will obviously be legal action from a number of parties opposing whatever proposal is made that would change the character of South Seas. So if you think about it legally, there are really three issues: before September 5th, right after September 5th, and down the road, if in fact the changes on our Captiva code are made. The other thing that the stakeholders are talking about are, again, involving the community, getting them engaged. They're looking at possible petitioning or some other community engagement like we did before with the 6,500 emails that the Board of County Commissioners received. We know that the Board of County Commissioners know how the communities feel about these amendments, but there's discussion now going on just to respectfully remind the county commissioners as we approach the workshop on August 29th and on September 5th, the hearings. We just want to make sure that the county commissioners understand that the residents of Captiva and Sanibel are still fully engaged in this issue, and they haven't gone to sleep on that. Let me just add two other things. One of the things, two of the things, or a couple of things that came out of these public hearings or public meetings on July 13th and August 2nd was that the build back provisions that are in the county land development code were taken a good look at, because the build back provisions were a major part of the discussion among the South Seas associations and with Timbers. And as a result of the meetings, I think there was, I know there was consensus among everyone there, including the county, including Captiva representatives, Sanibel representatives, and the associations of South Seas, that whatever ambiguities exist in the build back provisions, to the extent that they exist, and there's a debate about how ambiguous those are, or if they were ambiguous, but whatever ambiguities existed, they are going to be cleaned up so that it is absolutely crystal clear that people who had damage during the hurricane or any natural disaster will be able to rebuild their buildings to the size, square footage, and height that they had before, including incorporating whatever new base flood elevations or jurisdictional requirements for resiliency are being made by any federal or state or local agency. So what resulted from these meetings is that build back is not an issue. It is being taken off the table because the county is going to clarify, to the extent it needs to be clarified, that everybody can build back what they had, incorporating whatever resiliency measures are required under the law. And what that does is basically for people at South Seas, whether you're at Bayside Villas or Tennis Villas or anywhere else, that if you have destruction in the future from a hurricane, you will be able to build back what you had, incorporating those base flood elevations. So there's nothing to be concerned about on that front. And what the meetings clarified is that the issues of increased density for hotel units at South Seas that are being requested by Timbers or the county, or the request for building higher buildings for new buildings, not ones that are being built back, those are separate issues. And you don't have to support those issues in order to feel confident that you could build back your structures if there's a hurricane, if you have a non-conforming building that doesn't meet code at this point. And what flowed from those meetings was clarification with respect to those points. And that's very important because I think it eased people's concerns. And then lastly, we had a discussion at our last meeting, I think it was at the emergency meeting, about something that the county had placed on their website regarding these amendments. And there was a request made that we put it on our website, and I reviewed those and I explained how I thought we shouldn't put it on the website because they were not accurate. And they were included misinformation. I just want to report that the county pulled that down off their website and they replaced it with a very different set of information, which is consistent to what we put out today to our members. And it did include inaccuracies, and they were happy to recognize that and change it and withdraw it from the website. So that's my report. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Let me just add one other thing. I don't know how this is going to turn out. I'm very hopeful the Board of County Commissioners will recognize the problems and either continue it or just vote it no. But I am confident here that the Sanibel and Captiva communities have made it clear about what our concerns are. And I honestly believe that the county staff at this point fully understand it. I don't think they're confused as to what we're saying. And I think they're in a position now to articulate to the Board of County Commissioners in a very comprehensive way what our concerns are and hopefully why they have the validity that I believe they have. Jay?
David, it sounds to me like the key meeting is going to be the Board of County Commissioners workshop on August 28th.
Yes, yes.
That's the meeting where hopefully county staff will come to that meeting, say, you know, here's the issues with what we proposed. And that will give the Board of County Commissioners then the opportunity to change the direction that was previously given to
Yeah.
county staff. And they can say at that time, well, we want you to focus on this, this, and this. You know, take out the building height change for Captiva. You know, continue the administrative interpretation for South Seas. That's when those kind of events can take place. Am I reading that correctly?
You are. I mean, I think without question, there was a misunderstanding somewhere along the line that Captiva's building heights didn't incorporate base flood elevation, which it does and has.
Right.
And I think that is now become clear. And I think that addition, that change should be removed from the proposed amendments. And I think there's an understanding of how detrimental that would be if it's not removed, including increase in intensity outside the gate of South Seas by 50%, by disrupting completely our wastewater studies and the amount of wastewater potentially that will flow from it, the effect on the building heights in the village. I mean, there's a million reasons why it's a problem, and I think the county now understands that. With respect to the South Seas amendments, of which there are 4 of them, I think the issue there is they really didn't belong in a countywide amendment about how you measure building heights. Density on South Seas has nothing to do with resiliency. And I think the hope is, and Chairman Hammond of the Board of County Commissioners asked the question on June 20th. He basically said, why are these South Seas amendments in this countywide proposal, and can't it be bifurcated? Can't the South Seas be treated differently? I don't know if that was ever answered, but I think the fact is they don't really belong in this particular set of amendments, and they have to be dealt with separately and within the context of a process that has been long established and can take place within the context of a property owner making a request for whatever amendments they choose to make. So anyway, yes, the answer to your question is yes, Jay. This will be the time where the Board of County Commissioners will hear from the county staff what they've been hearing from us, and then they will have to make a decision of how they want to proceed on September 5th, if they want to proceed, and they will have to decide what instruction and what direction they give to the staff going forward with respect to these amendments.
Okay, then, okay, go ahead, Linda.
Well, in Jay's question, he asked if we expected the commissioners to say anything to redirect the staff at the workshop. Do you expect anything like that to happen, or them to give us any indication what will be happening on the 5th or 6th, or you just don't know?
I'm very hopeful that the staff will explain what they've been hearing at the July 13th and the August 2nd meeting, what they've been hearing from the communities. And it's my hope that there will be discussion between staff and the Board of County Commissioners. And it's my hope that the Board of County Commissioners will, though they don't take a vote, it's my hope that they will give staff direction as to how it
Okay.
proceed. And it's my hope they would give us a signal. We would be able to infer from their discussion what they're going to do on September 5th. I think it would be helpful if the community knows where the Board of County Commissioners is leaning, because, you know, we'll have people flying in for the public hearing on September 5th if they think that it's going to proceed as it was proceeding before. On the other hand, if direction is given to the staff to rework these amendments, or if it's you have a sense from the meeting that the Board of County Commissioners realize that this needs to go back to the drawing boards because there are problems they didn't and were unable to anticipate and didn't understand possibly the complications of it. And there are also other things that need to be clarified, like some of the build back provisions. It may make sense to vote no on these particular amendments and ask the county staff to come back with a better set of amendments. And I guess that's my hope.
Thank you.
David, do you know if that August 28th meeting is open to the public
The August 29th meeting is.
or 29th?
The workshop meeting is definitely open to the public, but traditionally workshops do not allow for the public to make comment. They certainly can be there. It is a notice meeting and the public has the right to be there. And I can assure you there'll be a lot of public there. And my guess is there'll be a lot of press there also.
All right. Thank you.
Will it be on Zoom?
I don't know the answer to that at this point, Linda, but we'll definitely find out.
David, I remember when we went to the August 2 meeting and I asked that question about the workshop. And I remember Kevin Ruane saying, yeah, we welcome input. So are they going to have time? I at least understood that the public would be heard at the workshop. There would be time for the public to make comment. Is that correct or wrong?
You know, I was there, and it's just funny how, people hear different things. My sense is there won't be public comment at the workshop. And I think what the Commissioner Ruane was saying is that between now and the workshop, people should feel free to contact the commissioners and or the staff and let them know your concerns and your feelings and what you want them to emphasize. But I did not hear from what he said that there would be public comment at the workshop. I could be mistaken, and you might be right.
Would you feel free to reach out to Kevin just to clarify that point? Because, I mean, I thought it was pretty clear to me, but like you said, we're two different things listening. And I asked him, I said, will there be public comment? And he said, yes. So maybe if we could get that and then send it out, if you think, I mean, I'm going to go to the workshop anyways, but.
Yeah, I'll ask him to clarify that and I'll let everybody know, but I'll bet you $1 that there isn't.
Oh, you're out for $1 then, David.
There was a comment from one of our members of the audience saying we listened to the recording of the August 2nd meeting, and it was stated that public comment is not embraced at the workshops, and that's been the tradition with the workshops in the past.
All right, owe you $1. He said it's not embraced, doesn't mean it's not prohibited.
No, it means they don't allow, it means they don't allow time for it, Tony. They usually will take
Okay.
comments. If you wanted to stay to the end of the county commission meeting that morning, you
Yeah.
can often speak to something, but they don't have any time at the workshop itself.
Understood. Thank you. Thanks for the clarity.
Always known that eyewitness testimony is always the least reliable.
David, is there anything the attorney can do to, review what's happened to date and say, that the county has done something inappropriate in the direction
I
that they
think,
gave county staff?
yeah, I think the attorneys that we've retained are doing exactly that. They're
Okay.
looking at everything that has taken place from June 6th or before to the workshop period and to determine and to advise the Board of County Commissioners of where the problems lie, what was done wrong, if it was done wrong, and that's what they've been asked to do. And so they will put that all together and provide that legal opinion, so to speak, to the Board of County Commissioners prior to the workshop. That's the intent at this point.
Well, I'm just that, to me, the whole thing seems bogus just because it makes no sense that county staff on its own, would come forward, with these proposals
Well,
Yeah.
well,
without consulting, the Captiva community. I mean, none of it makes sense.
I think it was the
And
process.
I just wonder, being a completely naive legal person, it just seems to me that the whole effort, everything that's come down here, there's got to be something wrong with it.
The process was problematic. And I think there were a lot of missteps along the way and miscommunications. So for example, even if you listen to the January, I think 17th, but the January Board of County Commissioners meeting where the staff was instructed to take a look at resiliency issues.
Which they went far beyond.
They went far beyond. There was the word density was not mentioned, and they have now proposed amendments that change density, potentially change density on Captiva. And so and there was, like I said, there was a misunderstanding of what the building heights were on Captiva. And I think there are a number of missteps along the way. The county Board of County Commissioners was advised by county staff that the proposed amendments was approved by the EROC committee, and they recommended it. And we now know that these proposals never even went to the EROC committee. So, I mean, there are a lot of missteps here. I think, I don't think anybody, let's put it this way. We were after a hurricane and there were a lot of things going on. And, the staff was, had a lot of things on their plate. I don't know how this all went so wrong. I think some people believe that, you take advantage of a crisis possibly. I don't know. But what I do know, Jay, is that we've done the best we can as a community, both Captiva and Sanibel, to explain what's wrong with this. And I just hope that our representatives, the Board of County Commissioners, listen to what we're saying and fix it. It's really fixable at this point. And the question is, we hope they do it.
Okay, does anybody have anything else for David?
There was another question that popped up. Are you or anyone representing Captiva able to be part of that workshop?
The answer is no. I think that normally staff runs the workshop. No, the workshop is a Board of County Commissioners workshop. Who will be on the panel of the workshop will be the 5 members of the Board of County Commissioners, period. And the staff will be in the staff role and they will make a presentation, but this is a meeting of the Board of County Commissioners and there will be no role for anybody in the community at that point.
Okay, before we move on to the next topic, David, I just want to say, and I'm sure everybody on the panel will agree with this. Thank you so much for the extraordinary effort that you've put forth on this on behalf of the panel, but even for the entire Captiva community. So very appreciated.
Yeah. Hey, David, can you just comment in terms of the fundraising effort for the legal fees? Are we in good shape? Are we nearly out of money, or can you just comment on that?
My understanding, and it's being handled through the Captiva Civic Association, but my understanding is that we're in very good shape.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on. Is Ken Suarez present and want to make any comments?
Jay, I'm here. Thank you for having me once again. I always appreciate the time that you guys give us. There's been a few changes for us inside the resort. We actually were fortunate to add a couple of the timeshare presidents to our President's Council group inside the resort. So our unity continues to grow. Michael Bell, who's basically their general counsel, helped facilitate that. I've met with them on multiple occasions, and it's great to have them a part of our group. As I mentioned last month, Timbers CEO Greg Spencer had put out some communication to all the owners, including timeshare, that they were going to be hosting a webinar to kind of explain the position of these changes that they're seeking. And so they're done now. I think there were eight meetings, and it's interesting because what sort of has happened now is that they've taken away the ability for a back and forth dialogue. They solely are controlling the narrative with the questions they choose to answer and whatnot on their webinars. But what I found interesting viewing them, and I've gone through the presentation at least 5 or 6 times just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. But a lot of people that I represent and people ask me questions all the time. What does the height really mean? Because in these webinars, Greg Spencer makes it clear they're looking for 45 feet. Okay, that is mentioned multiple times, 45 feet, 45 feet. And then 3 dwelling units as well. And what does it really mean? Well, I took their presentation, I took their schematics off the presentation. I started doing some calculations myself to figure out what they really mean, because they don't make that clear. And from what I understand from their documentation is, first they want a raised parking area of at least 8 feet off the ground, okay, off of grade. So we're gonna talk strictly off of grade at this point for this measurement. So they want a parking garage sort of raised 8 feet off the ground, and in that parking garage, from their calculations, it's about anywhere from 10 to 12 foot of pipe inside that parking garage. They want to be able to bring their vehicles in from inclement weather or possible flood. Mentioned that pretty clearly. Then the 3 dwelling units above that, which are all 12.8 feet. And then the roof system, which is anywhere from 9 to 12 feet. So if you do that calculation, we're talking about off grade, 68.2 feet off grade. Now, 68.2 feet off of grade is 45% taller than the tallest building inside the resort and probably on Captiva itself. Now that's given that this is the parking garage is 8 foot off of grade. So the impact to the resort is tremendous, and it's not 45 feet. It keeps on saying 45 feet, 45 feet is not 45 feet. It's minimum 68.2 feet minimum. Okay, so everybody has to understand the level of magnitude that this could cause inside the resort. Okay, and look, if somebody from Timbers wants to correct my math, I am more than willing to listen to it, but they've sort of cut off dialogue from us. So
Ken, I'd love to correct your math. Why don't you reach out to me? Because what Greg said on that call is he said parking plus 3 levels. And the starting slab, habitable slab, obviously from a base flood elevation, however that's determined by the authorities. He said he believed that parking under these units in certain areas to be graded up to get them more 2 or 3 feet above grade as they are now, because some of them are actually below grade. If you go in some of these units, they're actually down when you go into parking. But there's no 8-foot garage that you pull in and then it starts there.
I'm just taking the information off the slide, Bob. Maybe he needs to correct his presentation because his slide shows a parking garage that's 8 foot off of the ground.
All right, send me exactly what you're looking at and what you interpreted, and I'll clear it up for you.
Okay, and then I think you would agree that parking garage needs to be 12.8 feet because that's what it says in your schematic. Then you have 3 living levels of 12.8 feet. And then you have a roof.
When you say parking garage, what you're referring to underneath parking,
Well,
like Bayside and?
No, I'm talking about what is depicted on the slide. Look, I'll send you the information. I don't want to take up time, debating this. I took the information off of exactly what was on the presentation, and I came up with 68.2 feet. These are the types of confusions that we all have that we certainly cannot get answers to. But then there is a roof system that's going to hold mechanicals that's certainly going to be another 10 to 12 feet. So you start adding up and it gets pretty tall. Anyways, so there has been some confusing and misinformation that has been given. Another confusing and misinformation part of the presentation was a surge of 8.5 feet, 8.5 feet of surge. And I asked James Evans to provide me with some information about the information they collected from SECF, and they have Captiva at 3 feet of storm surge from the ground. Now, my building, the Tennisvilles, is sort of adjacent to the old tennis courts, and past the tennis courts was the parking area where South Seas kept their vehicles during the storm. And my water line on my building was 18 to 20 inches up from the ground. So
let me jump in here. I'm familiar with that SCCF analysis, and their conclusion was that Captiva generally had about 2 feet of water above grade from the hurricane.
Correct. So Jay, in the presentation, and Bob, I'll send you this slide also. In the elevation pics that they put on the elevation, they actually show an arrow at the Tennisville pointing 8.5 feet, which is about 3/4 of the way up the building, saying storm surge. And I can emphatically tell you that we did not have 8.5 feet of water rise at our building. So, the controlling of the narrative is sort of an issue that we as a group are looking at, and we plan to respond in some way to this presentation. But the frustrating point that we're facing is that after the July 13th meeting, it was fairly obvious that the ambiguous language and the land development code about build back was going to be addressed and unopposed. And Mr. Spencer was there at that meeting, and several other representatives. Bob, you were there at that meeting as well. And after that meeting, knowing that the county was going to sort of deal with that issue, these presentations continued on to literally worry our owners that, hey, if your buildings get knocked down, you're not going to be able to build back. And hey, it'd be a real shame if the county knew you might be over 50% damage also in your buildings, which was also stated, which was another a bit of misinformation. So this controlling of the narrative inside the resort is they're trying. I understand why. They never talked about density ever in this presentation. That my presentation to Tennisvilles was 1 hour and 15 minutes, and I think the density word was brought up one time for a total of 15 seconds. So you can see that that there's this gets a little skewed if you're not following it. And I have had some of my owners write me and with concern that if we had a catastrophic event inside the resort where a building was damaged beyond 50%, we weren't going to be able to build back. So, you know, it's reassuring to hear that the county is going to basically take that off the table and clear up that language. But, you know, I go back to what one of the gentlemen said in the meeting at Big Arts the other day, where, you know, when they bought the resort, they did their due diligence. They knew what they were getting themselves into, and you know, the rules are the rules. And I have yet to find a single owner that has approached me, at least, that agrees with what these land development codes changes represent. So that's sort of the sense of what's going on inside the resort, and you know. We continue to be a very unified group. We do wish that the resort management and Timbers management would dialogue with us. We're always willing to talk. You know, this is business and it's nothing personal, but that's been cut off at this point. And you know,
Ken, if I could interject, and I don't want to make this, you know, a tip. He said, she said. But I've got an email from you and others that you boycotted our president calls and not to attend them from you. So please don't tell me that we cut off.
You know, Bob, I'm not going to use this forum to hash out what misinterpretation you might have gotten from that email. But I can tell you right now, our group, and I have a text message directly to and from Greg Spencer telling him we're willing to sit down. So, you know, look, at the end of the day, we're here, and I'm making it public now to you, Bob, and if Greg Spencer is listening, that we're willing to sit down and continue a dialogue with you guys. If you choose not to, then so be it. But a one-way narrative, it you know, doesn't help, and it all it does is cause anxiety amongst the owners, which nobody needs right now, and while we're recovering from Hurricane Ian. So. But that's my report from inside the resort, and you know, thanks for having me on.
Okay, Ken, appreciate your comments, and Bob, when your time will come up, so we'll listen carefully to what you want to say.
Yeah, I do want to say something, Jay. I mean, I think that dialogue, and whether there's a disagreement or misunderstandings, or maybe there isn't a disagreement, but the problem here is when Blackstone owned South Seas and they wanted to change the administrative interpretation, and they had a project when they were going to replace the 140 employee housing units with condominiums and do some at the south end of the resort and some at the north. In 2015, they came to the community panel,
right?
Said, this is our plan. This is what we want to do. These are the variances we need. These are the deviations we need. What do you think? Some people thought it was great. Some people objected to it. It went to the hearing officer, and it got approved. Prior to that, I think it was 2005, there was a prior proposal, and the same process took place. The problem we as a panel have, and the problem our community has, is that the county initiated amendments are changing our land development code and our comprehensive plan for Captiva, and taking South Seas out from under our Captiva code, which it's always been under, and basically doing this without anybody here, including Ken Suarez and the associations, having a proposed clear plan from Timbers or South Seas, what they want to do. And that's the problem. I have personally, myself, I have no idea what I would say or what my reaction would be to any proposed plan until I see it. And I think that is the situation that we're all in. And that's why these amendments have to be rejected, is because they're asking us, these amendments are asking to change our code and our plan without having anything before us and knowing what that would mean. And that alone, this discussion between Ken and Bob, that is the reason why these amendments have to be rejected, because they're asking us to change what this Captiva Community Panel has created over the last 20 years in terms of building heights and density, asking us to change that without having any idea what a single property owner wants to do at this point.
Right.
Problem alone.
Okay, David, I think we all understand that. And that's the basic issue here. Somehow we wound up in a position where it looks to everybody like the county is trying to grease the skids for South Seas to do whatever they want to do, without any idea of what it is they do want to do.
Right.
So I think we all understand that.
Okay.
Okay, next up is Green Flash rezoning. I'll take that one. There was a public meeting conducted by Tim McGowan, who's the owner of Green Flash, where there were about, I'd say, 20 to 30 people at the meeting, including myself, David Mintz, and several of the homeowners, adjacent to the Green Flash property. There are a number of things that Tim wants to do with the Green Flash. I think the two most important are, first, he wants to create an outside dining area across the front of the building that would, allow one service line of tables under a roof. It would be a porch under the roof. That's the first significant thing he wants to do. And then the second and probably most significant thing of all is he wants to very significantly increase the amount of boat dockage that would be available for the restaurant. Basically, he would like to have about 50 slips where boaters could come in and use the restaurant. He has kind of a vision that the Green Flash could function something like Cabbage Key, where it would become a destination for boaters. If he got these additional slips, that would also help him solve an issue he has with having an appropriate number of parking spaces in relation to the number of diners that can be served, at the restaurant. I think at the meeting, he was pretty much overwhelmingly advised by most people there that they thought that his idea of expanding the number of boat slips would encounter, a number of problems, and he'd have a great deal of difficulty getting that permitted. I'm not 100% sure what the next step is here or what Tim's going to do, but I don't know, David, do you want to jump in, and have I left anything out? Or
No, I think the problem he has is that the county doesn't have jurisdiction over the slips and the dockage. So he's got to deal with multiple jurisdictions. So the county can say, yeah, if you get 50 slips, we'll let that mitigate the number of parking spaces you need. But if he can't get 50 slips from DEP or the Army Corps of Engineers, then he's got to go back to the county and say, I can't get 50 slips. So therefore, what do I do with the parking problem? And so I think what I said to Tim is that he should have a plan A, B, and C. I think everybody who's tried to get the expansion of their dockage have had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years to get the thing done. So I think that it's in his interest not to assume that he's going to get 50 slips, but to figure out a way to make the restaurant work for him with different options, one of which is that you don't get that expansion of the slips. And I think he heard that message, but I'm not quite sure. He's got to figure out the timing, because it could take a long time to get the slip issue resolved. And I don't think he wants to wait that long for the restaurant to open. So he's got a bit of juggling to do at this point. And I suspect we can find out more from the county exactly what the process is. They've been very open about that. And so we could do that for the next meeting and just find out what the county's view of the process is.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment. To me, the biggest problem is not only just the docks, but it would be the sewer. Because he quoted somebody that worked for Cruise, but I'm gonna tell you, it's not a $30,000 fix, because I've been down that road before, and I think it would be helpful to him to try to figure out, and I mentioned that to him too, just try to figure out what you can do, because it's, you know, even if we have the sewers come in, it's gonna be several years before we're
Yeah.
actually hooked up, and so he needs to figure this out, and I sure hate to have him spend all kinds of money doing all this, and then, you know, finding out that no, because the docks really, you know, the dock was going to solve his parking problem. And the reason why he needed the parking was because to expand his number of seats. But I think the biggest thing is that they won't do the seats unless they have this septic problem taken care of. So it's, you know, it's like a three-legged stool.
Right, I guess the question is, should the panel be taking any action on this now or doing anything, or should we just let this ride and see what Tim's gonna do as a result of the comments he got? I don't know, I think my impression is we just, you know, let it ride and not take a position, but I don't know, David, anybody else have a different opinion on it?
I think we don't often take opinions on these things unless we think that it's detrimental to Captiva. So, I mean, for an example, if somebody thought 50 slips, if they were granted, is something that would not be good for Roselle Channel or the rest of Captiva, then the panel could take a position. Maybe it's premature to even think about that, but I think that would be the only reason the panel would take a position is if they thought something was detrimental to our community.
Yeah, I think you're right as well. And I think our role ought to be to communicate to the residents what's going on, give them a little bit of education, talk about the process, but I don't think it's in our interest to be weighing in on various private business matters, you know, on a case-by-case basis.
I think that's generally been the position of the panel. I mean, under certain circumstances, the green flash informational meeting would have taken place at the panel. For some reason, it was set up with his attorney separate from that. But I'm pretty confident that Tim would come back to the panel if he gets more information and hold the next meeting at the panel. And I'll find out from the county exactly what the process is at this point. But I think he's not asking to change our code. He's not asking to change our plan. So I think at this point, it's a private initiative. And I think that, again, unless there was something that really slapped this community in the face that would be detrimental to the community, I think we don't have to weigh in at this point.
Okay. All right, well, let's leave it at that. Okay. Next up. Other updates. Anybody else have anything? I don't think Kevin Ruane is attending, is he, David or Ken?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No.
All right, that brings us to Mike Sawicki. Lieutenant, are you there around?
I'm not seeing him on the list.
Okay. Fire District, we've already heard from. CEPD update. Daniel Munt.
Hi, this is John. I'm standing in for Daniel today, 'cause he's
Okay,
been away.
thanks, John.
Just to give you a brief update and keep it short, we've heard enough about trim today, so we're going to give you our dates that we set. The workshop is on August 31st, where we're going to update the commissioners on the budget, and that'll be at 1 p.m. that day. our regular board meeting is scheduled for September 11th at 3 p.m. And then our tentative hearing will be after that at 5:01 p.m. on September 11th. And as for right now, we've decided for the final hearing will be on the 19th at 5:01 p.m.
Okay. Anybody have anything for John that they'd like him to address?
John, I think you should talk about the Army Corps.
About the Army Corps, okay, yeah, the Army Corps stated that they are not able to fund our project, or at least they've given us the an answer that they won't be able to fund that, and that has to do with our easements not having a perpetuity clause in there. So that gets pushed to FEMA now for them to make a decision if they want to fund the rehabilitation of the beach.
And we fully expect them to be funding the rehabilitation. This is actually somewhat good news because it was sort of stuck in the Army Corps based upon some regulations. Those regulations are being looked at because if I remember correctly, about 80% of the waterfront communities had the same issues. But from our point of view, this allows us to move forward in the non-Army Corps funding pattern, which we have done before. So it gets us moving forward, which is good.
Okay, so Linda, do you feel like, based on what you know now, that it's unlikely property owners will get an assessment to bring the beach back to what it was pre-hurricane?
That's my opinion. Bob, what's your opinion?
I'm sorry. I was writing something down. I didn't hear that last sentence.
Okay, the question is, do we think we're going to send out an assessment for beach renourishment because of the hurricane? And I don't think we are.
No, this year? No.
No, if I could clarify that, we would have to vote on a project, hold the project, get the totals for all of the expenses for the project, and then we would assess
But
communities. But there's a lot of steps before an assessment.
Yeah, and it's not that, it's that I think we will be covered by the state and the federal government, okay?
Correct. It's actually, I think Linda said it, but it's a good thing that the Army Corps came back and denied early, because we didn't want to get caught up into Army Corps la land and them not saying anything for 6 months to a year. The fact that they came out now and quickly have said we're not going to participate is a good thing for us. Now we can move forward with state and federal and county.
Yeah, recall that this is Carrie, that the state has 2 chunks of money that is set aside to cover all these projects across the state, but they need to have a firm no from these other funding sources. And so it is, again, I'm echoing that it's positive, so it helps us look at those other sources now.
Okay, anything else from CEPD? All right, we'll move on to SCCF update. Looks like you're here, Carrie.
I am. So I had a chance to check in with Matt yesterday and see what he'd like to share with everybody. So just a few quick things. The first is just to mention kind of where Lake Okeechobee is at and how that, of course, fits into our water quality and the Caloosahatchee. So right now, essentially the Army Corps is operating under this operational flexibility that's actually being used to keep Lake O water levels higher right now. So the lake's actually at a water depth of about 15 feet, maybe a bit over. So that's actually beneficial for our area right now because it's protecting us from receiving damaging flows and having more exposure to blue-green algae blooms. With that being said, I think the one thing to keep in mind is that if we do have another storm, or if we see, El Nino translating into wetter weather in the upcoming months, that may mean at some point we are going to see some releases down the line. But I think it's worth saying that at least for now, we're benefiting from that operational flexibility. Matt also wanted to just highlight that, again, that sort of operational flexibility is a really key feature of LOSUM. that Lake Okeechobee scheduling operating manual, which is sort of the new regime for how the lake will be managed. That will be coming online in December, barring any further delays. I will also mention, I'm not sure if this is an issue that folks on Captiva are necessarily following closely, but there is the Chiquita lock conversation happening on Cape Coral, in terms of how removal may or may not affect water quality. The only thing I'll say about that, Matt, first of all, Matt did write a good op-ed that appeared in the news press, if you'd like to see what he had to say about that. If anybody is concerned about that and wants to discuss, I'm just going to mention his contact information. He's always available to talk about these issues. He can be reached at, and I can share this with Ken after, but his phone number is 239-413-6915, and his email, so it's his first initial M and then his last name, and DePaulis is spelled DEPAOLIS@sccf.org. Again, I'll make sure Ken has that, and you can always reach out to me and I can direct you to him. And the last thing he just wanted to reiterate, of course, David did a great job of outlining exactly what's happening with height and density and our involvement, of course. And Matt just wanted to reiterate that we remain supportive of the panel's efforts and the community's efforts, supportive of that idea of the petition going around to gather community support. So just wanted to reiterate that. And that's all we have from SCCF today.
Okay, Carrie, thank you. Does anybody have anything for Carrie?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Next up, Bob Walter, do you want to make any comments regarding South Seas update?
Yeah, Jay, I'd like to give an update just on where we are with our restoration and put back in several areas.
Good, thank you. Good.
First, the golf course is progressing nicely. Started sodding aprons on the greens last week. If you've been out there and see now grass on all the dirt, it actually is coming together and looking pretty cool. Our target completion date for the golf course is mid-November. The north pool is currently being repaved and the tiki relocated. The slide pool is actually targeted to open at the end of September. The pool is up and running. We've got all that operational, but at the same time, one of our slides took a couple of palm trees on it, and we're still waiting the parts from the manufacturer. The main pool deck target is still on for December. Bayview Fishing Pier, also known as the T-Dock, was completed. It looks fantastic. Unfortunately, it's not
Are there
available.
redfish under it right now, like there always are?
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, it's not usable because it's the entrance is in a construction area, and we took some erosion right there at the front of the T-Dock where you came on. So we've got to repair that before we open that back up to our guests. We have purchased, we talked about 2 food trucks are available daily, one at Sunset Beach and one at Chadwick Square. And Sunset Beach is open daily with limited services and chase lounges. And again, both of our marinas are open, up and running. So slowly but surely. That's all I have. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, sure. What is there anything new on the water park that South Seas was, planning on? What's happened with that idea?
Well, everything's been kind of put on hold right now, Jay, till we circle through all the other issues.
Yeah, okay, that's certainly understandable.
Bob, I heard somebody say something about, are you having erosion along the Redfish Pass? Is that right?
No, we've done we did from the storm, but the
No, after it was rebuilt, because you have a beautiful, you put that, I saw what you did in a video or something, and it looked great. And
the whole groin there. Yeah, what you're talking about, Linda, somebody at the last week's meeting said that there was issues with all that groin work. I go through there quite a bit. I haven't seen anything. Bob, are you aware of?
I don't know. I remember vaguely reading a comment that somebody said that the riprap was not done and the sand was washing out.
Yeah,
underneath.
right.
Is that
right.
what you're referring to?
Yeah,
and I wondered what was going on.
Well, we don't have any erosion. I can assure you, Stokes Marine is the one that did the work on this. And Stokes Marine is second to none. And we had civil engineers, 2 civil engineers, frankly. And Hans Wilson was one of them that assisted on this. So it was designed to spec, and I'm not aware of any erosion.
Okay. And
Yeah.
Jay, you haven't seen any either.
No, I'm through there all the time in my boat and it looks very sound to me. Okay, anybody have anything else for Bob?
Bob, Tony here. Do you have units that you guys own that are actually operational right now?
We have, I think right now we're at 16 or 17 units that are not owned by us, but that were, they're out of construction areas. We can check somebody in, letting them know the limitations of the resort and not put them in any danger because there aren't any nails and roofing materials around. So yeah, we're slowly but surely adding, and by September, looking October, maybe 50.
50 units?
Yes.
Good. Thanks, Bob.
Okay, David, you have anything else for us?
I do not.
Okay. All right, wastewater committee. We are still stuck where we have been for the past 2 or 3 months. I can't get feedback from the city of Sanibel on where they are in their consulting study regarding how they will handle the additional processed wastewater that would come from processing our wastewater. That consulting study was supposed to be done, or at least, a first draft of the result was supposed to be available in June. I'm not getting feedback on it from Sanibel, which I guess is understandable given all the other issues Sanibel is facing right now. So we are still, just sort of stuck spinning wheels right now. So I don't know. I'd like to see this thing keep moving along, but I think we're a victim of other priorities right now. So we're still where we were, since I reported at the last meeting.
Jay, I think there are 2 issues. I think we would very quickly have a report from Tetra Tech on the parameters of the study that they were involved in, which was basically 200,000 gallons per day of wastewater coming outside the gate, from outside the gate on Captiva, and 200,000 gallons of wastewater from inside the gate of Captiva if South Seas joined the project, which is a total of 400,000 gallons. At this point, what I'm hearing informally is that it would be very difficult for Sanibel to agree to accept wastewater from Captiva if they don't know what the amount of wastewater Captiva will produce going forward. So our Captiva plan has always assumed that the county would support wastewater quantities reflective of our current Captiva code and plan. But if in fact the building heights on Captiva outside the gate are going to increase intensity by 50%, meaning the wastewater will probably increase by 50% from, I'm guessing, 200,000 gallons per day to 300,000 gallons per day. And if South Seas goes from 200,000 gallons to something greater than that because of increased heights or increased density, it changes the parameters of what Sanibel thought they would be taking from Captiva in terms of wastewater. And that raises capacity issues with respect to Donax. And it also raises issues with the size of the pipes that would be carrying the wastewater from Captiva. So I think part of the problem, in addition to just not getting the result of the study from the initial parameters, I think part of the problem now is Sanibel is concerned that they don't have a handle on how much wastewater Captiva is going to be producing based on the uncertainty of the changes in the codes and the plan on Captiva. So I think.
Well, I accept that, David, but they could still be saying, here's what it means, assuming, that, the amount of wastewater we're going to get was what we were originally told.
I suspect, I'll follow up on that, Jay. I suspect we can get that rather quickly, notwithstanding all the other issues Sanibel's dealing with.
Yeah, well, I'm just, I want to be sensitive to all of Sanibel's issues.
Yeah.
But, we're just sitting here spinning our wheels for months now with,
Yeah, no, I think there's two issues. It's really thrhree issues. There's the technical issue of the
Right.
200,000 gallons. The technical issue is if it's no longer 200,000 gallons, but 50% more than that. And then there's the political issue of Sanibel being concerned that they can't count on the county to limit density and building heights on Captiva. And
right, but if that's the case, if that's what's holding them up, we ought to be told that.
right, I'll try to find out for you.
Okay. Well, I sent Dana another email on that last week, but he's out on vacation.
Yeah, he is.
Can you believe the man's taking a vacation?
If he is, it's well deserved.
Obviously, I'm being facetious.
That's right.
Okay, stormwater. Linda, do you have anything to update us on?
I have nothing to add at this point. We're on a sort of a pause as things get settled in other areas.
Actually,
Actually, David has an update. Da, da, da.
I do have an. Molly has provided a final updated revised stormwater proposal for the amount that we always discuss, which is about $198,000. And that proposal has been transmitted to the county. And as the county is, and I want Sandy to hear this, as the county and the resiliency is beginning to think about what the priorities are and what funding mechanisms there are, et cetera, this $200,000 study, which was in the works prior to the hurricane, is clearly a resiliency issue because it deals with flooding in the village where we have the most flooding, and we're hoping to get that funded. And it was just again sent to the county a couple of days ago just to remind them that they had initially seen this proposal and had committed to funding it.
Right. So you're not aware of any reason why they were not going to get funded, that
No.
200,000?
I
Okay.
have no reason to believe it won't get funded. That's correct.
Okay. All right, that brings us back to iguanas.
All right. So, Fredo's been coming out. He comes out once a week on Tuesdays. And he's been getting 40 to 45 iguanas when he comes out. I think the question is he keeping up with the population? And I asked Alfredo, if money was no object, what would you do other than coming out every day? What would be the best way to cut back? And he said he would put out traps, but the problem with traps is you got to come out the next day to remove the iguanas. If they're there more than one day, then they're going to die from the heat. So if he was coming out 2 days in a row, it would help. And then Tony had a good idea that if he had traps on his property, or I could put them on our property or wherever, he learns how to bait. His team finds out how to bait these traps the day before Alfredo comes out. Then Alfredo can remove the iguanas on Tuesday. Like he'd bait them on Monday, and Tony's team, whoever, they bait them, and then Alfredo removes all the iguanas on Tuesday. So I don't know how many traps Alfredo has, but I think it's worth a try.
Alfredo said to me, John, that my expert iguana suggests that we're not keeping up with the population. They're everywhere, and millions of babies, millions of 12-inch, 8-inch iguanas running around. And so I spoke to Alfredo because he happened to be here trapping some, or not trapping, shooting some. And he said he thinks he would like to come 2 days in a row, Tuesday and Wednesday, and set the traps, kill as many as he can on Tuesday, set the traps on Tuesday, and then come back on Wednesday, kill some more and pick up the ones in the traps. And he would do it 2 days in a row, Tuesday and Wednesday, and Tony's traps could fit into that process if we did it. The problem with it is we have to move from $25,000 to $50,000 annually to do that. It would double the cost. And so that's something that I think the panel needs to think about. How far behind are we with the iguana population, and whether it's important, regardless of the cost, maybe go back to the county and see if we can get some more money than the 25, but also, even, use some of our own money or some money that we raised to get 2 days at least for a year, so that we can try to get this under control.
Mhm.
I
I agree with that.
Well,
Because we skipped a year, we were without Alfredo for a year. So that helped the population grow. And so I think, if we could, in the meantime, I think if we could get Tuesday and Wednesday, that would really help. But in the meantime, we could try this traps and I'll find out how many he has and go from there.
Well, let me just say this, we can budget $25,000 from the panel if we choose. See if we can get refunded from the county, but meanwhile, guarantee 2 days if the panel feels like spending $25,000 is.
Well, we could, here's my thought. Why don't we just on the, on the panels tab for 6 months, tell him to come out 2 times a day.
Right.
So the county is paying for 25,000 now. I think we have enough money that we could commit to paying him for, say, 6 months.
Right. And see how it goes.
12,500 and see if that makes a difference.
And how many get caught in a trap? Does somebody say like 24 can be in a trap?
Well, he has, I don't know how, he has these bigger traps that he said though he can get 20 to 25 in one of the bigger traps. So I don't know if we're gonna have to he's gonna have to buy more traps to make it worthwhile. So I can see what that would cost, how many traps he recommends.
Yeah.
And what that cost would be. It would be on top of
Well,
the 12,500.
maybe he wants to keep the traps himself.
He said he has traps that he could use, at least to me, he said.
Yeah.
I think a big push for a short period of time to try to eradicate them is the way to go.
Well, at
I
least
agree.
see if it would make a difference.
Yeah, if it doesn't make a difference, then plan X. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I
Okay,
think too, John, if you're watching every week and you say we're getting 24 or 25 iguanas, and then after 2 or 3 months, maybe it's going down to 10 or 5, that would certainly give us an indication.
Yeah. I mean, we know it helps. How much does it, it's got to be all visual because you can't go out and count, how many iguanas are out there.
I think something like we agreed to for 6 months is a good idea with check-ins every month. And if we can cut back, then we cut back, or we need to add on, we add on.
Okay, could
I think we need to
somebody
get- I
make a
think we-
motion?
I'm for it.
A motion to, at panel expense, fund Alfredo for an additional day per week for 6 months.
All right. I'll make that motion.
Let me just clarify, that's 2 days in a row. It'd be Tuesday and Wednesday so that he can lay traps. It's got to be 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
And he
we
said
all-
he's able to do that.
Yeah.
And can we also, Tony was talking earlier about being able to bait the traps, that his guys could maybe bait the traps on Monday as well, so we get 2 days of trapping. Did you say that, or did I make it up, Tony?
Yeah, no.
Well, you can't do 2 days because if you bait him if he brings the traps out on Monday and baits them, then he's gonna pick them up, but he can't set them again because he's not coming out the next day.
No, no,
Yeah.
no. What I'm saying is, I thought you said you were gonna have your guys, before we talked about 2 days, you would have your staff bait the traps on one day and then he could come out on the next day, right? Did you say that?
Yeah, the trap, so no, if the traps are, yeah, if the traps are sitting there, you'd have, Alfredo would be getting iguanas Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning.
Right.
Yeah.
We could bait those traps if you want to. Yeah, he'd have 2 days of pickup if he shows us how to do it.
Right.
As long as it doesn't, eliminate his traps to be too
Yeah.
thin where, that's up to him. You just let me know, John.
Okay, and
because
flowers,
Trap
they like
Tuesday.
flowers. Iguanas
they
like
do.
flowers. Okay.
That's why I want to get rid of them.
Yeah. And
Okay.
Okay,
I would
would
like to
have-
move that we do that.
Yeah,
all right.
Can we also,
We have
can
a
we
second.
also get some, like when we're doing this, some data so that we know what our counts are?
Yeah, he gets a count, he counts them every week,
Okay.
Bruce. Yeah, and he sends, when he sends his bill into the county, he has a full record of that, which he could show us at any time.
Actually, I've got a copy of that, at least going back through this year, because he includes it
Okay.
on the bill to me, so I can send it to everybody if you want to see it.
Okay,
Well, it'd be good if we put together like a graph or something, Ken, so we can see it, hopefully trend up when we
Yeah.
do these new measures, and then hopefully trend down over time.
Mhm.
yep, no, that's good.
I can send you something after this meeting to show you what I've gotten up till this last bill.
Okay, thanks, Ken.
And I would also say, yeah, the panel should fund it initially, but we should also seek reimbursement from the county for the 12.5, anything going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just because this is something I've always believed that the county should be funding anyway.
Right,
Yeah.
well, my thought is if we can demonstrate the increased effectiveness of 2 days, that would strengthen our argument with the county.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay,
right.
so the motion is that the panel fund Alfredo for an additional day per week for a 6-month period of time. And we'll review his counts, on a monthly basis.
No,
Yeah.
all right,
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
yeah, second,
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, raise hand, aye.
all right.
Any opposed? Okay, good. Any
All
other
right.
reports?
Mhm.
Apparently not. All right, Ken, you want to talk about D&O insurance and our financials?
Very briefly, because you've heard enough arcane material today. The financials are set out in the packet. You can see we're still in pretty good shape. We can worry about fundraising as we get towards the end of the year. Our D&O insurance came up in July. They responded with a premium that was 5 times the previous one.
5 times.
5 times. I thought that was pretty good. Apparently, they were trying to make us into an HOA. So I have pursued a different nonprofit insurer, and I got an extension for 1 month, and I'm pursuing a new insurer, and it looks like we can get it down back to where it was, if not lower. But I'll know better in about a week.
Okay, good, Ken.
How much is it? How much is it right now, Ken?
Yeah,
It was $1,700 a year, and they wanted to take it up to 84.
Oh, gee. Okay.
So it's not just property insurance we're getting screwed on, it's all kinds of insurance.
Yeah.
what's the insured amount?
Hey, Doug. Oops.
1 million. I forget what the occurrence is. It's not terribly high.
Okay, well, I would ask that when you speak to the new potential insurer, that you see if you can go higher than 1 million. And see what that would be and bring that back to the panel, so we have a sense of what that is. And can you also tell us, is that 1 million for the panel as a whole, or 1 million per individual, or just give us a better sense of, if you have it.
Yeah, policy terms.
About what the terms of the policy are.
Yes, I can send that out. I believe it's $1 million for the panel as a whole, based on litigation you would do as a group, not individually.
Okay, but so
Because
for
the-
example, say Ann Brady gets sued individually.
She would not be sued individually. She'd be sued as a member of the panel. So the panel will be sued as a group. They're not going to pick you off one at a time.
If I'm going down, you're coming with me.
There you go.
That's what that says.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, yeah, if you could, I mean, I'd be curious about that too. In other words.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd like to see, $1 million is very little in today's world. So I think we need to see if we can up that up, get that higher. And then we just need to understand exactly how the coverage works and how people on the panel are protected.
I can send you the quote that I've gotten, and I can ask them for the higher coverage and see what the premium is.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other panel member comments or questions?
Yeah, hey Jay, I had one question maybe for David, but I guess it's been in the papers a little bit recently around this sort of, I think it's like 1.1 billion that Lee County has been awarded for affordable housing, and I'm not sure what the I'm not sure if that's the right number or not, but I know they are having some workshops, and there's a process where they're seeking input. And I guess my question is that something that we as a community should try and partake in?
Yeah, there's a it's 1.1 billion. You got that right. It's coming from HUD. There are parameters on what can be built and who can live there based on income and various other factors that are somewhat complicated. The county is holding a series of meetings regarding in various communities regarding the use of these funds and how they can be distributed. My understanding is there's one on Sanibel, actually on August 29th in the evening, I think 5:30 or 6 at Big Arts. And it does relate to whether CHR can get funding for affordable housing on Sanibel or in Iona or other places where Sanibel employees of Sanibel businesses and possibly Captiva businesses, I hope, can get access to some of that housing. So Bruce, yeah, I think it would be useful to go to that meeting on at Big Arts on the 29th. It's going to be right after the workshop meeting, which will be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was thinking more like specifically for Captiva. I know we've talked in the past about affordable housing for the police members as an example. And, you know, I don't know if we have that same issue with the I imagine most of the fire department doesn't live on the island either, but I guess I was thinking about specifically around the police and how we've sort of every year had some discussion about trying to find someone that's willing to lease out a property or two at an attractive rate.
Okay, now you're getting issues that I don't fully, I think with the police, I mean, you got obviously one sheriff living in a CCA home.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure where Christine actually lives. And I know she's in Sanibel and I know Mike's on Captiva. I don't know if any of this would relate to the HUD housing, but maybe that's why we should find out. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure the question can be asked on August 29th at that. But if you go on a county website under the Lee Resiliency, there's a whole, and I can send it to you because I printed it out. Bruce, there's a whole outline of what the HUD requirements are, and I can email that to you. And
Thanks.
You take a look at that. I just happened to notice them the other day. Okay.
Yeah.
So the way we should, I mean, obviously we have an affordable housing issue on Captiva, but we're also totally built out. So the way we should be thinking about this in terms of helping the people who work here and can't afford to live here is to support affordable housing off island on Iona and potentially Sanibel. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other comments, questions? Ken, anything from the audience that we have not addressed?
I believe we've touched on everything. Barbara Joy Cooley did send a couple of messages that she has seen the wastewater transmission study and reviewed it, and she sent copies to you and David during this meeting.
Oh, okay.
So check your
Who's
email.
that?
Barbara Joy Cooley.
Yeah, is that the most recent one, or has she seen one? Let me see what that is. Now, I think this was the initial transmission study. Yes,
Yeah, that's the prior study that
That's the study
identified all the,
yeah,
the
that's
needs
the
they were-
study that shows us what transmission lines have to be built and what the cost is. What the study that Jay was referencing before that we haven't seen is the effluent disposal study. And, you know, what they do with the extra effluent that is produced from treating the wastewater. And that's the one we haven't seen, and that would be an additional cost on top of the transmission study that we were just sent and that we had in hand. But we're looking for first the effluent disposal study and then a financial study. Once they take the transmission study, which we were just sent, take the effluent disposal study on top of that, you need an injection well, the ability, 10 more golf courses to spread the water around or whatever it is. And then you're going to have a financial study to see, based on those two studies, what it's going to cost us to join the system. And it's those last two studies that we haven't gotten yet. And that's what Jay was referring to.
She's going to look into that and see what she can find out. She's with Cody, by the way.
Okay,
oh, okay,
great.
great. Okay, I think that concludes our agenda. Our next panel meeting is Tuesday, September 12th. David, would you keep an eye on how things are progressing? And if you think we need an interim panel meeting before then, you know, let Ken and I know so we can set one up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
There's going to be a lot happening between now and, you know, September 12th.
Right.
So if you think we need a panel meeting, we need to keep in mind that we need to give the community a week's notice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it seems to me this August 29th meeting is gonna be pretty important to share the feedback. So I wonder if we should move our meeting up a week.
Right now, September 5th is the day of the scheduled public hearing, so you don't want to conflict with that.
Oh, okay, okay.
Well, my dates, I looked at my own calendar and, you know, I could do a meeting 2 weeks from today if we thought that, you know, was necessary.
I think I think it's best to have it after the August 29th workshop meeting, don't you?
Yeah. I don't know. I think we got to rely on David to advise us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because after the August 29th meeting, it may be postponed, right, David?
No, I don't think the August 29th meeting will be postponed. I think the September,
No,
maybe.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
If that gets postponed, there's no urgency
Yeah.
for us to meet.
but
Exactly.
but Tony, my sense is that if the September 5th meeting gets postponed, it's going to get postponed on September 5th. We may have insight into where the commissioners are leaning on the 29th, but I'm not sure they have the authority to they have the wherewithal at a workshop meeting to change the date of the September 5th meeting. It's a lot of procedural formalities here that they have to deal with. But yes, my guess is there's going to be a lot of discussions behind the scenes, so to speak, between now and the 29th. But if there's anything we need to do, I know there's going to be an issue of public engagement. How we're going to engage the public between now, continue to engage the public between now and the 29th, because the public wants to be engaged. And if something that we do requires panel input, then we'll have to hold a special meeting. Maybe it won't, because it may be consistent with what we've been doing all along, but there may be some adjustment that is needed. So Jay, I'll let you know.
Okay. Very good. Okay, I think we've completed the agenda. So a motion. to adjourn.
Yeah.
I saw.
Okay, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
You.
Thanks, everyone.
See you soon.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.